The Amazigh people. This project on the North African Amazigh people intends on addressing the long history of their fight against colonization, the impact of these various colonizations that are still evident today, and the continued daily fight against Arabization that the Amazigh face though the world looks on at North Africa without knowledge or awareness of their plight. When people think of countries like Morocco, Algeria, Libya, or Tunisia, they think of vibrant Arab culture. They might remember the occupation of France or Spain. However, the truth is that this region of the world, known as the Maghreb, was and still is inhabited by its original occupants, the Amazigh people. The Amazigh have been living in the Maghreb region for at least 12,000 years, since the Neolithic times. It is difficult to pinpoint an exact date because the history of the Amazigh has been an oral history for the majority of its existence. Similar to the Indigenous people of Canada, the Amazigh are split into different tribes over this large portion of land. While the individual tribes have differences, they are unified under one name and flag. The Amazigh were and still are, for the most part, farmers. Some are nomadic farmers that travel through their regions with the changing of seasons. Others have chosen to settle into villages, making homes out of clay and straw. Each tribe has their own system of government, some choosing a council of elders and others having a type of monarchy, but the common thread throughout each tribal system is that all tribes work together to provide for the entire tribe. No one is left on the outside to fend for themselves. The families live multi-generationally with all their relatives together. Women are equally important to men when it comes to taking care of the family. They are out alongside the men and the youth in the fields during harvest time. Even more, they are the weavers of the intricate blankets that this region is known for. Now, the history of colonization in the Maghreb is a long and complicated one, partially because most people are simply unaware of the many attempts at colonization that have happened, beginning with the Carthaginians, the Romans, the Vandals, and the Byzantines. Each were only able to invade the cities on the coast because of their little experience with deserts and mountains. The Amazigh were able to retreat to the mountains and the deserts until they had rested and replenished their supplies. They would then return in full force to kick the invaders out. Then, in the 7th century CE, came the Arab armies. The relationship between the Amazigh and the Arabs is very complicated because they have both assisted and resisted the Arabs. The Arab armies from the Arabian Peninsula began invading the Maghreb as part of the Muslim conquests. Arab conquerors converted the indigenous Amazigh populations to Islam, but the Amazigh tribes retained their customary laws. The Arabs abhorred the Amazigh as barbarians, while the Amazigh often saw the Arabs as only an arrogant and brutal soldiery bent on collecting taxes. Once established as Muslims, the Amazigh shaped Islam in their own image and embraced schismatic Muslim sects, which in many cases were simply folk religion barely disguised as Islam, as their way of breaking from Arab control. Even after Amazigh converted, they were treated as by the Arabs as second-class Muslims, heavily taxed and even enslaved. During this time, before the invasion of the French and Spanish, the Arabs focused primarily on Islamization. This means that the Amazigh were able to keep their language and culture as long as they adhered to the Islamic laws. Although this sounds quite passive on the part of the Amazigh, there were continued revolts throughout the years that reminded both the Arab and the Amazigh people that they had indeed not been conquered. As more Arabic peoples migrated to the Maghreb, the Arabic language took hold, the Amazigh identity weakened, and the Amazigh populated the mountains and the desert, moving away from the fertile plains and cities. Then began the scramble for Africa. The majority of the Maghreb was invaded by the French, with a small part of Morocco being invaded by Spain and Libya being invaded by Italy. The scramble for Africa, also known as the Conquest of Africa, was the occupation, division, and colonization of African territory by European powers during the period of time known to historians as the New Imperialism. There were three reasons for colonization. Power. European countries were competitive and imperialized to keep themselves equal to each other. Natural resources, mainly including silver, iron ore, zinc, and lead. And religion. Jews and Muslims were converted to Christians. Impacts of each of these colonizations were great. One very visible impact is that French language is still the #1 language taught in schools, used by governments and businesses in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. In Libya, the Italian language, which is still known by the older generation, is not used as an official language. For the Amazigh in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, the fight for language rights is now two-part because they must fight against both French and Arabic languages for recognition. After having had to band together with the Arabs to remove the French, Spanish, and Italians from their borders, the Amazigh must now fight the Arabization that has slowly taken hold of their countries. It was after these countries were pushed out of the Maghreb that Arabization really began, beginning with the government making Arabic and only Arabic the official language. The Amazigh have had to study and learn Arabic in schools while their own language and cultures were shoved out of point of view. The suppression of the Amazigh language and culture and history is the most important part of the racist Arabization, and thus the recent revival of Tamazigh, the Amazigh language, is a major milestone in the attempt to undo Arabization. In 1997, during the first Amazigh World Congress, the Amazigh flag was created. Blue represents the Atlantic Ocean and Mediterranean Sea, green is the Maghreb, the land that they come from, yellow is the desert, and the red Yaz symbol symbolizes the free man, which is also the meaning of the word Amazigh. Unfortunately, in June 2019, the Amazigh in Algeria were banned from waving this flag because it was an assault on Algeria's Arab identity. 41 Algerians were arrested for carrying the Amazigh flag in protest. Even though the French were kicked out of the Maghreb, their hold on the Amazigh is evident in the country's use of French. In Morocco especially, the French language is used for most business dealings and used as the primary language in schools. In Morocco in 2011, Tamazigh, the official language of the Amazigh, was recognized as an official language alongside Arabic and French. Also in Morocco, the language is being added to many highway traffic signals, in the institutions, and in media and business advertisements. In Algeria in 2016, Tamazigh was recognized as an official language. In Libya and Tunisia, Amazigh people are still struggling for language recognition and cultural rights. As of recently, the Amazigh language has been introduced in some schools in Morocco and Algeria. In 2011, the King of Morocco declared that both Tamazigh and Arabic would appear on banknotes. However, because of a backlash from the Arab communities, it has been deemed an attack on Arab identity, and this declaration has been reversed. Furthermore, there are still French businesses that continue to run in these countries, making profits for the French. One such business is the silver mine on Mount Alban in Morocco. In the high Atlas Mountains of Morocco on Mount Alban, the Amazigh have been fighting for their land. On Mount Alban, there is the world's 7th largest silver production. In 1969, the SMI founded a mine at this silver deposit. The mine began extracting silver in 1978, and in 1986, the people began protesting the digging of wells. Unfortunately, the leaders of this protest were imprisoned. For the last 5 years, 8,000 Amazigh have been living on Mount Alban in an occupation camp, protesting the mine and protecting the village's water. The reason that they protest is first the environmental damage, including crop damage, groundwater pollution and depletion, and the loss of wildlife, and second, corrupt money handling. The company that owns the mine is based outside the country, specifically in France, so much of the money does not stay in Morocco at all. Second, while Morocco does have shares in the company, the money goes to the royal family, who have yet to put that money back to the people the mine is hurting. They may give some money back to the people of Morocco, but not to the people specifically suffering from the crop damage and water pollution. The Amazigh, despite their long journey against invasions and colonization, have held fast to their vibrant culture and ways of life, and it is clear from the research that I have done that they will not give up until they are truly free in their land again. In 2015, I traveled to Morocco for 2 months. When I was there, I had no idea there was a divide between the Arabs and the Amazigh. I had heard from others that the country was Arab, and so I assumed it had always been that way. This assumption has reminded me that I assume the city I live in has always been the way it is, not thinking of the indigenous people who have lived here before. Once I learned this difference between Arabs and Amazigh, my understanding was that the people who lived in the mountains and the desert were the Berber people. I had assumed that this was just another name for the people who lived in the mountains and desert rather than the city. The first thing I learned during my research was the term I had been using for this people group was wrong. I learned that the term Berber was actually derogatory and that the people preferred the term Amazigh. I was very disappointed during my research of the history of these countries in the Maghreb for two reasons. First, there was a lot of information about the French, Spanish, and Italian colonizations, but there is very little about the colonization by the Arabs. It seems that, like myself, people see the countries and their bold Arab culture and assume that they have always been that way. And second, in some places, the colonization of the French and Spanish were regarded as beneficial, and the Amazigh should be grateful that the Europeans came and modernized them. I am really disappointed that I didn't do more research before I traveled to Morocco, because I am sure I missed out on a lot of understanding of the Amazigh people. Having learned the value of knowing the full history of a place, I have begun to rethink my view of how the Canadian government and schools represent the Indigenous peoples. My goal going forward is that I will recognize that a country's history does not begin with its European colonization, and that when traveling either through Canada or internationally, that an understanding of the Indigenous history will make for a fuller experience.